when Greg Gentry produced some new results. Again, he showed it was theoretically possible, but it was very impractical. DARPA has invested a lot of money making it more practical. It's still too far from being practical to use today, but in 5 years maybe they'll be able to do it at least in some districts. So there are some technologies. But I think that, in general, those problems that we had in the previous slide are going to remain with us for a while. So I want to put in front of you a potential social contract, the kind of thing that I would be willing to put in front of the public and defend what we might say. So this is the way the contract might read. In order to gain the postulated societal benefits, we have a slide for those, acknowledging specified risks. Okay, we're not going to get rid of all the risks in managing this data. There are going to be privacy risks there. The subject agrees to provide the data for analysis. The data holders have to agree to be held to account for mishandling of the data. I think that's the other end of the contract that has to get signed up to, and there have to be specified means of redress. And with that, I think the researcher and the subject could sign off on that. That's the argument.
I like this presentation format. All of these privacy notices should be in this format where you can click on societal benefits, see what the benefits are, and then look at the risk and so on, instead of having this long statement that goes on and on and on.
That would be a better way to do it. I think the question is creating the environment in which it's in the interest of the company to do it that way. Okay.
Well, but there's a separate issue in that the FTC only enforces what the company promises. So if the company officially says we're going to screw you every time we can do it, it's okay. The FTC is perfectly okay with that.
As I said, the trick is to find the environment to make the incentives produce that result. We may not have the right incentives in place to produce that result today. I think I could agree with you on that.
We have some representatives from companies, so please note this addition.
So my question for you folks is this: what do we need to learn in order to enable that contract, to make that? So this contract calls for a lot. It says, I'm going to provide my data. I understand there are some risks. You guys holding the data have to agree to be accountable for mishandling. So I think, could you sign up to that today? Would you know if somebody mishandled your data, for example? How would you know that? So these are some research areas that I think could help us. In the first case, better language for specifying privacy policies. We want to be able to support algorithmic enforcement of those policies. I think that's a computer science problem, and we want to be able to support user comprehension. So this has got to be, you've got to have some people who understand human experiments and can work with you on that. We've been working on this. This is not really a new topic. There's been Lori Craner and others have worked on this. She's now actually at the FTC, so she'll exercise some leverage there. So that's one area, I think, in referring back to my attraction to Helen Nissenbaum's formulation of informational privacy as contextual integrity, I think we need better sort of domain-specific definitions of privacy. So one of the contrasts between the U.S. and the EU is the U.S. has taken what's referred to as a sectoral approach to privacy regulation, which just means we regulate things by sectors. So we have a law that applies to credit reporting, okay, and that governs credit information. We have other laws that apply to medical records, HIPAA, right, applies to healthcare data. We have even laws that apply to video rental records, right? Remember the reason for that? It was another Supreme Court nomination, okay? And I don't think they were so worried about the nominees' records, but I think they all realized suddenly that their own records were at risk for this kind of exposure. So we don't have videotape rental stores anymore, but at least very few, but I think they've extended it to DVR records, although I'm not really sure how that applies to, video on demand records. Anyway, so we've taken a sectoral approach to privacy. We've got different areas, educational records. Probably some of you are familiar with this. I've learned about it, FERPA. So I think informational privacy calls, as contextual integrity calls for us to define the contexts that are important and try to identify rules for information to leave that context and the penalties for improper removal. So I think this is an area that could be researched. This to me is fundamental and very much a computer science kind of problem. Techniques for tracking information flow within and among systems. Okay, if we really want to know whether one piece of information has influenced another, then we need to be able to track information flow in systems. We know how to do that to some degree, but probably not at the scale we need to. And we need to build systems that are built on that premise. Okay, we also are going to need this, I think, for other reasons. We need to establish provenance for scientific data. Our scientific data is almost all on computers these days, not only the data, but the programs that are used to process it. Okay? If you want to repeat somebody's experiment, you need to be able to be sure of the provenance of your software data. So I think that's an area that's very important. We can do it within programs, typically across systems of programs. We need more work. This is important to be able to do this for a whole variety of reasons, and whether you want to try to do it at the level of adding tags to information and tagging everything, or whether there's a better way to do it, I think is an open question. We need to be able to bind policies to data. We'd like to be able to enable basically usage-based controls. So we could, if we have permission to use this data for some purpose, we'd like to be able to have access control that says, okay, we can tell what the purpose is. And there's been some work to retrospectively look at the kinds of access there were and try to infer what the purpose was behind it. But I think we need to be able to do that. We'd also like to enable distributed enforcement of policies. If you can bundle the data with the policy and have a policy, an engine that then can enforce whatever policy came with the data, that seems like a useful device. You also might bind an audit trail to the data, in which case you've got perhaps support for information flow tracking. And of course, this many people would consider bugaboo, but it's also that's basically digital rights management. Okay, this to me is very important. We need to if we want to improve or affect the way that private data is handled, we have to have accountability for the handling of it. And so we need to be able to detect when violations occur. And I think violations will occur. You have to accept that as a premise. People need to have confidence that when the violations occur, someone can be held to account. Right now, accountability, of course, is a huge problem if you think about even cyber warfare. Okay, who is behind this attack? Well, that's a very hard question to answer in many cases, just from the data that you've got. Oh, well, no, it keeps coming down. Okay. So I think this is a key part of this, to enable the social contract. You need to have confidence that when something bad happens, you can actually point the finger at someone or some organization. And I think information flow tracking might be one way to help that, but we need other things. Okay, this is in the how do you quantify the benefits? What am I going to get for giving up my data? We need. I don't pretend to have any great insights in this area, but I can see that there's a need. We need to be able to identify kind of benefits there are, you think there are going to be, and you should at the very base level, if you're saying, I want to use this data for something, you should have a story about what do I expect to get out of that use. If your research project needs this data, what's the positive benefit that you expect from your research project? If you can't say that, then probably if I'm holding the data, I'd say, well, if you just want to play around with it, why should I use it? I want at least a story about that, and if you quantify it in some way, that would be better. And that's, okay, this is another area where it would be for social scientists to study, but the effects of surveillance on groups of people of different sizes. Mass surveillance is widely argued to lead to stultification. If you look at Clancy's paper, he actually talks about this quite a bit. Meaning, if you're observed all the time, you're going to restrict your actions because you know you're under observation. That is very widely repeated and believed, I think. And typical evidence is, East Germany during Soviet occupation. But in fact, that surveillance was coupled with a lot of other repressive measures, and so there were actions based on it. I think it's interesting if you think about it. We do think people behave differently when they know they'll be watched. We believe that auditors have an effect, and that inspectors general have an effect on the organization. So we, at some level, we all acknowledge that if someone's watching us, we're probably going to be less likely to have our expense account or whatever it is. But there's also, in some cases, I think some considerable evidence that people tend to get acclimated to this kind of surveillance. They ignore it. We don't really pay attention to those cameras. And I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember, there was a PBS series decades ago called An American Family, in which they basically had a bunch of videographers live with this family. And it was clear that after a while, the family just started ignoring the fact that these cameras were there and recording that this was going to be a TV show. They just gave up. And so that's a question about this. Sklansky, questions whether we really know what the effect is. So I think that's a good indication that we need to do some studies in the area to try to figure out what the effects are. Okay, that's really about it. Way early, so we have a long discussion. Privacy is not dead, but in some respects, I think it's a topic that's worthy of your attention. Data analytics, we hope for a lot. Getting those benefits depends on access to data. We need to be able to maintain trust between data subjects and data collectors. And so the reason for the house there is that's the refuge. And I've listed a number of research areas. These are the references. All of the slides will be available. And let me, before I close, give one plug to something else that I'm involved in, unrelated. The NSA has been trying to encourage science of cybersecurity. One of the ways they've been encouraging it is to create an award for the best paper published in the past year. So this is now asking for nominations of papers that were published in the calendar year of 2015, so last year. So if there was a paper that you thought was really advanced the science of cybersecurity, I want to encourage you to visit this website and submit a nomination for that paper. We've gone through this process 3 times now, and with pretty good success. This year we had that's interesting. I guess I'm done. The decisions on this are recommended by a panel of experts that includes the Tiffany, who's an award winner. So it's a feather in your cap to if you have a colleague you think produced a good paper, please. So, any questions?
So very thought-provoking and interesting talk. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I'd like for you if you could share with us your opinion of online social networks and how now people are the instrument of their own demise by